My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And welcome back to The Experts. The truth has arrived, and I did not do a show last night or this morning. I got back from Sedona, and it was a long trip, I'll put it that way, and I had to get some rest. So I came back and turned on the news today, and it is today, let me just tell you, this is what I see. Okay, this is the way, not the news cycle, but the energy cycle in this country seems to ebb and flow. There's certain things that are occurring right now that are going to lead up to violence tonight, tomorrow. Things are going to hit a peak. I said they would start. I may have overplayed it a little bit in August, but I said the end of August, that is where I said this way back in June, that August was going to be the defining moment when things start. It seems to be that was the case. I was right. I mean, it's easy to see the way these things occur from the beginning of August on. Things have increased, and the violent rhetoric, more than anything, has increased. Now it seems like whenever anything goes wrong, or if there's a decision that is not what a certain community wants in this country, that they react violently. And what's interesting to me about this whole thing, right? I'm going to talk about the Breonna Taylor case. I've already talked about that to some extent before, where I said that I thought it was terrible tactics. I think a lot of the times that law enforcement, when they serve warrants, I cannot understand why they wait until people get home sometimes. Now, listen, the one thing about the Breonna Taylor case is that, like most investigations, there's very little information that is released. But one thing that stands out of all of it, I don't know, there was reports saying that she wasn't guilty of any wrongdoings. There's reports saying that she was involved with some stuff. There's reports saying that the guy that she was looking for, or that the cops were looking for, who they arrested later, was not there. They're saying that she was named on the warrant. They're saying that she wasn't named on the warrant. I mean, there's all these different things that come out, and people believe, they pick a side, and they believe what they want to believe. That's the way this works nowadays. And it's wrong on both sides. When these cases are this political, which is going on right now, I know that in order to do an investigation, it has to be slow and methodical. I mean, we don't want, regardless of what happened to Breonna Taylor, we don't want people being put in jail that shouldn't be in jail, cops or anybody else for that matter. But there has to be a consistent flow in how they communicate to the public nowadays. It just has to be. There's just too much information release out there. And the problem is a lot of that information is fake information. But here's the problem. I think overall there's a couple problems here. And one of the biggest problems is that no one wants to do anything. None of these people that are protesting now, right? They sit around just like people with the wall. It doesn't matter if it's left or right. The majority of people in this country don't do anything or voice a concern before something happens. And I learned this doing crisis management for wealthy people and doing protective work for celebrities that and for wealthy people, that they don't think about anything until it happens. And you try to tell them, hey, check it out. You might want to do this for security, or let's try to move, in these ways from now on. Let's try to, if you're having this problem before it gets any worse, let's try to do this to quell the problem. They're not interested in that. Majority of people who are successful think under an illusion that they will always be successful and that there's nothing that can go wrong and nobody around them will do anything wrong. Well, the American people are just like that. They think that life is, they can come home and go to work, or they'll come home and collect their welfare check, whatever. But they think this is the way it is, that it can't get any better, it can't get any worse. And when they see something that they don't like, then they get upset about it. And that's all they do. They just get upset about it. The problem is whether it's crisis management or whether it's people looking at life and watching television and stuff, is that almost everything is predictable. You can look at the ebb and flow of how politicians, how political they are, really. I mean, I hate to say that way, but how political these people will become. The more political they become, the more of a divisive entity they become. And the more divisive they become, the less effective they are at actually leading. In fact, most of these people are not leaders. They are just simply people who are professional manipulators. That's it. And they manipulate the system and you and I so that they can continue to collect a paycheck. And really, for the majority of these people, which I think is blatantly clear now, is that it's not even about money as much as it is about power. So the people wait nowadays. The way things work is that you wait until things get bad or somebody gets killed or something is done where you feel like it's wronged, and then everybody says, well, I'm outraged, the community's outraged, we're tired of being oppressed, yada yada yada, and then they go out and they burn stuff and nothing gets done. Nobody learns anything from these riots. Nobody learns anything from these protests. They never hold the politicians accountable. Very rarely. I mean, there's been some cases where now they're going out and protesting at these politicians' homes. That's not going to be effective. It's not going to work. I think in Virginia, when this past spring, when the Virginia militias got together and people around the country got together and went and stood 20,000 or more strong around the Virginia Capitol in Richmond, and they made it known. They were armed, they were peaceful, but they showed force. And they made it known that they were not happy with that. And that was before it actually got to a fevered pitch. They didn't wait for it to get to a point where they had to react with guns in order to ensure the Second Amendment. Now, there's still problems in Virginia. There's no doubt about it. I think they should have occupied that Capitol building until they got what they wanted. I mean, 20,000 strong, armed, peaceful. That means they're thinking through the process. They're not letting emotion rule them. They could have gotten what they wanted. Absolutely could have gotten it. They could have, I believe they could have even gotten Ralph Northam out of office had they been able to sustain that. I do believe that. That's why Martin Luther King is so effective. That's why we hold him in such reverence, and not Jesse Jackson and not Al Sharpton. We don't hold those people. Anybody who holds them in high reverence, you're kidding yourself. Or George Soros, for instance. George Soros, it has his hands in everything, his sticky little evil fingers and everything, and nobody holds him in high reverence. Everybody looks at him as evil. But when you look at the people who stood their ground for the right reason before destruction was called for, those are the people that we remember in history. George Washington, the founding fathers, they didn't ask for war. They asked for freedom from tyranny, and they didn't get it. And they asked for this long before. Their protests were long before the war actually occurred. And they wanted to be free. They were so big at that point, they were so organized, they felt as though we do not need to fall under the reign of a king. There had been generations here born in the United States. And they had slowly moved to try to get away from it, and they were truly oppressed. We don't see that now. We don't see that. We see people just simply jumping at, I don't like this, I feel oppressed, let's burn the city down. That doesn't do anything for anybody. It's not going to change anything at all. In fact, it's going to make it worse. But it's all based on the fact that people wait. They wait until something occurs or it gets so bad, and then they react violently. That, again, is why Martin Luther King was so successful, because it was already occurring, the violence was starting, but what he did was he took a step backwards, grouped together some powerful people and said, we want what's right. Not, we want justice. They did say they wanted justice, but justice means what? Martin Luther King had a long-term, openly disseminated plan, and also an openly disseminated understanding of what is good for the country. He never talked about separation. He talked about what was good for the country. And you hear other people like Malcolm X or anybody else that comes out there that may have been a powerful voice in the past. And basically, here's what occurs, which is happening now. Division. It's always about white or black. Even the Attorney General of Kentucky, the first thing that comes out of his mouth when he's given a press conference today, listen to this.
I understand that as a black man.
That's the first thing that comes out of his mouth. First thing. So it's just like all the rest of this stuff. In order to affect change, we have to start looking at this long before it gets to this point. As a citizenry, we have to be willing to stand together, not based on the color of our skin, but based on justice. See, that's the great thing about justice, is that it should not look at color. It should look at the soul. Alive, not alive, human being, animal, whatever. It needs to look at the soul. But when you're an attorney general and this whole nonsense that happened with Breonna Taylor, in my opinion, first of all, we just don't have the clear story, as I was saying before. But in law enforcement, I don't know what's occurred. Now they just throw bullets anywhere they want. You watch these not drive-by, but the car chases. When are we going to evolve in law enforcement to get to a point where we are thinking ahead of the not learned helplessness, I'm trying to think how Pat McNamara put it, and I put it in my book, these ways that we do things that we've done them for so long, and we've moved past that. So in some cases, the tactics that we use are absolutely wrong, but it's whoever came up with them back in the day that everybody just said, okay, that's why we do it. Institutional inbreeding, that's the term I was looking for. Thank you, Pat McNamara. Institutional inbreeding. We don't even know why we do a lot of these things in law enforcement. And I think when we look at Breonna Taylor's case, that's what you see. Why do we wait until warrants happen to go out and we get these warrants, and then we follow people around, we put them down in their home when we could have arrested them the entire time? And I know they're trying to locate different people. Okay, keep locating them. Wait till they come back out. Get them the next day on the street. They don't do this stuff. I've been a part of these things, and it's frustrating to me. It's frustrating. It's also a big part is ego. The SWAT teams or the cops that are investigating this, they want it now. They got to get it now. We learned that lesson in the SEAL teams, and we've learned it over and over again. When you do something that is tactically an exercise that could be termed tactically aggressive, right? It's an aggressive movement. Well, sometimes those movements don't have to be aggressive, such as when you are, I'm trying to use civilian terms here, when you're nowhere close to the shore and you're going to jump in off of a helicopter. Helicopter comes down, it drops your boat into the water. You're 10 feet off the ground or off the water, 10 knots. That's the way it's supposed to be. Yeah, you drop the boat onto the water, and then you jump in off the side of the helicopter into the water. You get in your boat and you go to shore and you do your operation there. So it's a stealth way to come in over the water and then get in and infiltrate a certain area. Forgive me, guys, if I'm butchering the technical terms of this, but I don't use those technical terms when I talk to normal people who've not done this before. So when we learned the lesson the hard way, when we had one guy killed and another guy severely injured, when everybody's very aggressive when that boat goes under the water. They wanted to be because we were aggressive by nature, SEALs, and so they're out into the water, close as they can to the boat. Well, one of the cases, I'm not going to go into great detail about it. The boat, either the strap broke or accidentally got cut. The boat went and the guys jumped, but they were at 190 feet above the water. One guy died and one guy lived. And we learned about that aggressiveness. We had a big stand down and everybody learned. And then the next thing we know, we go out there and we're doing another exercise and the helicopter drops the boat. I don't know if it hit wind or whatever. It started to rise and people jumped in the water. Got stuck in the mud because it was a very shallow area to jump in. But the helicopter rose over 20 feet and they still jumped. It's not an aggressive, it seems like an aggressive move, and it is aggressive to jump out of a helicopter, and try to catch the boat at night. That's very aggressive. You have to be somewhat aggressive, but you have to think your way through these things. And sometimes safety especially when you're beyond the horizon, is of the utmost importance because we have so few people. You have to think your way through this, and you have to follow the procedures. Well, in the cases of like Breonna Taylor, we get hyper aggressive when we get a warrant, and everybody wants to get them. And I get it, but there's certain circumstances that people put themselves into in law enforcement. Doesn't have to be that way, especially when somebody starts shooting from the inside out and the curtains are drawn. I would never shoot into that place. I have no idea what's going on in there. Could be a hostage situation, could be children in there. If you see something, you know where the firing's coming from, you have to work your way out of there, or you got intel saying they're the only person in there. I mean, it's intel driven maybe, but otherwise you seek cover. You seek concealment where they can't see you or hit you, which should have been done to begin with. You have a warrant, you're driving up there. You should have, unless you are entering into the building, and in which case they may have been, no-knock warrant. They hit the door. They scream out who they are. Sounds like they said they did that. Somebody starts shooting. You either engage that target, in which you fill the room and you engage the target, or you quickly retrieve your men and you get out of there, and then you hold it. Then it definitely becomes a situation where you got to bring in negotiators and so on. I don't agree with doing that like they did in Pulse nightclub, where you have an actual terrorist, somebody who's saying they're a terrorist, and then you call in a hostage negotiator. It's not going to work. You might as well just go ahead and assault the place. So law enforcement, unfortunately, has not evolved forward in their tactics, and they're doing things that are uncalled for. And then also a lot of these places where you have liberals in charge, they're not training people properly. A gunshot comes from over there. They're just going to shoot over there. You're chasing a car like the UPS driver. I think that was in Florida. He got carjacked. The UPS driver's in the truck. The guy who was a violent criminal was being chased by the police. They wait until he turns around. It was like the Keystone Cops. They come from all 360 degrees shooting at this guy, kill somebody in the car next to him, kill the UPS driver, and I think they eventually killed the carjacker. I mean, they got these helicopters. When are they going to start putting a sniper in a helicopter? We do it effectively all the time in the SEAL teams and in the Army and in the Marine Corps. Why not put a sniper in a well-flown helicopter? They could have shot the guy from, wouldn't even have to been that far off. They could have shot him. I don't understand why we don't do that. I told you I saw in New Mexico, I saw a car chase when I was coming out here to Arizona. Helicopter overhead. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. Cop cars, there must have been 20 cop cars out there following behind the guy. And then after they punctured his tires, they're still following him. He's going down the freeway, throwing sparks everywhere. And the helicopter's flying overhead. Why not take that guy out from the helicopter? It's not the heart of a shot. He's not going to go to the left or to the right. You back the cars off. You take the shot, take him out. Why aren't we evolving to that point? So anyway, putting all this stuff together, what I was talking about before, it seems like I'm all over the place, but here's the reality, okay? We whether it's the civilians in this country and getting upset and feeling like they got to go out and protest, and they're being led by violent people that are wanting chaos and revolution. They think they're being led by people who want to see a change. They're not looking for anybody. Look, you think you're oppressed now and you're black, let a communist regime take over. Let the Democrats have everything they want. Had the Democrats been there for you all this time? They have not. Why in the world would you think that they're going to be there for you now? They're not. Why would you think that the Democrats are going to do anything for the black community? Why would you allow yourself to be defined by the color of your skin after all the fighting that has happened in this country to get to a point where you are not defined by your color of your skin? But who does that? Who has convinced you to do that? The left. I know people on the right, they don't want to define people by the color of their skin. Conservatives, they don't care anymore. They want to move forward. Who do you think it was that ended slavery? Abraham Lincoln, Republican, first Republican president. You don't even think like this. Why? Because you're involved in the situation. You're not forward thinking the situation. You wait and you wait and you wait, and then you react and you listen to who's guiding you. Remember the Hegelian dialect. Cause a problem, offer the solution, then you manage the outcome of that whole problem. You have to realize you're being played, right? So that's on the political side of it. From the tactical side of it, listen, cops, you all need to start getting together. Even if it's your little group that you work with during the day, unofficially, that you guys always rely on each other, you need to get together. You need to take it upon yourself to go start training together, shooting and moving and communicating. If you don't know what to do, go find somebody who's actually done this in special forces. Reach out to me if you can. I'll try to get you located with somebody. If the department is not going to help you understand better tactics, then you need to start working to understand them yourself, because this crap it's too much. There's too much going on for you to make a mistake like this, where you're shooting through a house with the blinds closed, not knowing who's in there. And in the case of the knucklehead cop who shot into a bunch of other apartments and Breonna Taylor got killed, should have known that's going to be a big deal if it comes to light and there's nothing in there, no drugs, no nothing. And here's a woman who works for the 911 system. You should have known something was going to be bad. And just because somebody is bad doesn't mean you should put the surrounding areas in danger. I don't care if everything they did was right. There's chances and opportunities to arrest these people other places. Unless it's an imminent threat to the surrounding public, why would you do this? We're not at war. These people, if they've been around, if you've been investigating them for 6 months or 3 months or a year, what is one more day going to hurt where you can locate them all? Well, we couldn't locate that one guy, and then we got him, and then we said, go. Okay. Why don't you let them come out of the house? Why don't you let them come out of the neighborhood? Why don't you follow them down the road and get them to a point where you can arrest them? I explain that to me in the majority of these drug cases. There is such a thing as being too aggressive in certain cases. Now, I'm not talking about car stops. I'm not talking about arrests gone bad. I'm not talking about preparing yourself for the fight. If you're going to go and you're going to knock on a door, you should be ready for a fight. I don't care if it's a domestic disturbance. I don't care if it's a terrorist and you've been told that they're in that door. Entering a room should be treated the same. There's a potential loss of life. Now, it doesn't mean that it's imminent. And if it's not imminent, then why are you entering into the room? Now, I know people say you're getting in a sticky thing here because there's been things where they get a disturbing the peace call and they go knock on the door and some crazed woman comes out with a knife and stabs one of the officers. Yeah, you should always be ready to go to guns and stop the threat, eliminate the threat. But when it comes to these warrants and when it comes to society and what's going on right now, you need to start thinking your way through it, because you are not only, this is very important, listen to me, you are not only battling against drugs and against lawlessness, which is rampant in the cities in this country, you're also battling against a communist takeover, a fake revolution. Well, it's not fake, a revolution is really happening, but it's all fake. The other people who are revolting have no clue what they're revolting about. They have no idea about the reality of what life is like in a country that is not ran by in a free republic. They have no idea. Most of them have never lived in. You talk to people who came here from Cuba, they know what it's all about. You don't see them out doing this stuff. So here's the whole parts of what I'm getting at here, okay, is we have to start looking at this, what's going on in this country, and we have to start trying to break it down before it gets to crisis level. It's the same advice I would give to people when I'm doing crisis management. You have to think your way through this, and thinking your way through means that you are going to understand the potential of things that could happen before they happen. It's not rocket science. It's not magic. It's not something, where you have to be some kind of soothsayer with a crystal ball. This stuff can happen. And it does happen. And you have to be able to think your way through it. But that's not what people do. We just have imbeciles everywhere at the top of everything now. Because for the longest time, we have promoted people based on color. We have promoted people based on gender. In certain cases, their sexuality, which is the absolute dumbest thing I've ever heard. We have to have more gay people on here. What does that mean at all? I told the story the other day about a black guy that was talking to at a stoplight. He then had a motorcycle crash. He was driving like an idiot. And I remember sitting there next to him, his whole arm and shoulder, he was messed up. I don't even know if the guy lived. His skin was just taken off by the road rash when he skipped across the road. And I remember sitting there praying for the guy, and I blocked the traffic with my car, waiting for first responders to get there. This was years and years ago when I was in college. And I remember looking at him and thinking, man, that black part of his skin is so thin. You can't even, if I took the top layer of my skin off, I would be the same color as this guy. And it's, from that point forward, I was never racist, but from that point forward, it just meant everything to me. I have to be a person who walks and looks at someone for who they are, not what the top layer of skin says they are. So getting back to all this stuff, I'm all over the place, but in my mind, I'm very focused. We have to, whether it's in law enforcement or in the general public, you have to stop being guided by what is happening now and start forward thinking these things. Good grief. Do you know the amount of chaos that occurs between cops and people because parents aren't parenting? Because they're not taking care of their families, because they're not preparing their children they're not disciplining their children so they grow up and be disciplined adults. They're just letting them be raised by the phones or by the school or by the people around them, by society. And the point of all this that I'm saying here, and it seems like I'm rambling, but here's the point of it is no one is forward thinking this stuff and trying to stop it before we get there. There's no crisis management here. Crisis management doesn't just mean you manage a crisis. It means you pre-think the possibility of a crisis and you come up with good plans of action. You come up with ways to eliminate the possibility of it even happening. And there's none of that. People that are rioting today because of Breonna Taylor are people who did nothing in the past when they thought, you know what? We've heard of the law enforcement, and we've heard about some of these shootings or the aggressiveness. Let's go out and protest peacefully. Let's ask cops to come and put out the word. If you're a cop and you feel like your training budget has been cut or you feel like your relationship with the community has been injured, then let's get together. Let's start bringing the incompetent politicians and executive leaders of law enforcement. Let's bring them to the carpet, and let's start bringing these people from the inner city and where the problems exist and those families, let's bring them to the carpet. Let's get this stuff fixed. And no one does that. No one. And we are the way we are now because of that. Not because people have gotten meaner or because politicians have gotten more incompetent or because executive leaders have become just bigger piles of political crap. It's because people, the citizenry of the United States, allow those individuals free reign to do whatever they want. And when it doesn't go their way, nowadays they destroy stuff, which does nothing either. No one's being held accountable. Nobody's doing anything about it before it starts. Nobody's standing together. There's cops. I can guarantee it in Louisville and anywhere else in this United States, there's cops saying we have no training. And our department is filled with idiots because of recruitment obligations to get somebody of the right color or gender or sexuality or whatever, men, women, whatever. It's become less safe. There's people that work together less. The training is just horrible. And you can't talk to the people. You have chiefs of police and sheriffs who are being guided, not by choice, by the mayors, who should be nowhere around this. So when I look at all of this stuff, it all comes down to the same thing over and over and over again in this country. People are not aware until they get emotional, and they're unwilling to do anything until it's just too late. In most cases, people aren't doing anything at all. The people you see rioting stuff, those people are not the ones who are the game changers. They're not the ones who make the right decisions. They're not the adults I was talking about in the last episode that's going to step up and make things right. These are troublemakers. These are people who are emotional. These are people who have, in their mind, they're always victimized. The fact is, the time for crisis management has come and passed. And although there is still an opportunity to fix a lot of this stuff, the people who have the ability to affect the change, like they did in Virginia, they did what was right in Virginia when they stood up against Ralph Northam. They do it once and then they leave and they expect it to be different. It's not different. If you're going to stand up for the right reasons peacefully, it's not a quick fix. It's not a let's go show our force and leave. That means nothing to these people. Just like going out and showing force and then leaving it up to the very same people who allowed it to happen doesn't do anything. The American people, and I'm talking about people even on active duty in the military and in law enforcement, good politicians who are there for the right reason, and the people who live rich and poor, you need to understand one thing. All of you will lose whatever happiness you have if communism, Marxism, socialism, whatever you want to call it, is able to get a complete firm hold of this nation. It is going to destroy this country. Your opportunity to stand together and stand peacefully in force. It's like a bear playing patty cakes with a chihuahua. When the American people stand together, you are just a brute force. But right now, a quarter of you are being led this way, a quarter of you are being led that way. 50% of you just sitting on your couch doing nothing. It doesn't work that way. There has to be participation, and it has to be done where you show the government and you show the people who are trying to destroy things the way it is. Man, I hope I'm making sense, because in my brain, it makes total sense. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. Let me just tell you real quick about my book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 workbooks and the new children's book. All of these were written with safety, awareness, and communication in mind. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, best-selling book. The reason why is because it shows you how attackers target you, and it shows you how you can turn around, divide your life into sectors, and do the same thing as they do. Look at you as the target. Once you do that, whether it's your family, your life, your business, your city, you can determine who would attack you, why they would do it, where it would happen, the time that it would happen, and the avenue of approach that the attackers could take. And you learn about the vulnerabilities. What vulnerabilities would they exploit in all of those? Once you see that and you realize you have all the knowledge that the attackers want, you can turn around and build better defenses, better plans of action, and plans to completely avoid any of this stuff. Now, there's a workbook number 1, that is the threat assessment workbook, goes with the first half of Sheep No More. And then there's a second workbook number 2, that is the defense assessment. You read Sheep No More, you apply it in the threat assessment book, you take that information, and then you put it into the defense assessment workbook, and you build your whole awareness. For the children, The Adventures of Teeny Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's a book of pictures with safety, awareness, and communication put in there, and then you, the parent or the teacher, goes to teamlittlebigs.com and you get the lesson plans and you teach the children through those pictures. Go get them all, and let's get back to the show. All right. I got to throw my reads in there every now and then. Remember, also, go to connectzing.com. I have not been on there in a while because I've been so busy driving and doing all these speeches and doing this podcast. And I got to get back on there because if Facebook, October 1st, Facebook says they're going to change things. If they start deleting accounts, you need another place to go. And I would suggest that you go to connectzing.com and check it out, because you have to listen to the second podcast in order to understand how important that social media website, and it's still developing. Still looking for people to help finance it. We're even considering having it where if you join, you're partial owner and you can actually contribute to Connect Zing. All that is being worked out right now, but it was created by Drago, a good buddy of mine, who was a prisoner in a socialist prison in Poland when he was part of the Freedom Underground there. He came to America, became a free citizen, and became a Navy SEAL and served us for 20 years, and now he's a computer programmer. So I've gotten together with him, and we are creating this social media platform for you. And like I said, it's still a work in progress, but that's what we have to do. We have to build this, because here's the case, and I want to leave you with this today. All the things that we see occurring are things that we could have fixed before if we were engaged. We're not engaged. That's part of the problem of being free. You stop being engaged in what's happening. But you have to be engaged. You have to stay in the fight. Just because the revolution was finished in the late 1700s doesn't mean that we're done growing. It doesn't mean that you're way back then. It was no longer needed for the citizenry to be engaged in what's going on. It is more important now than ever, because now, they don't have the British, for instance. They had to ride their ships all the way over here from there to get to go to war with us. Now, people are controlled by a click, by a post or a tweet. And we're talking a lot of young people have been indoctrinated for many, many, many years where they just believe what they're told. Folks, it's more important now in reality for you to be engaged with what's going on more than it's ever been. And I'll tell you, it's going to be a shorter show today, because I'm going to sit back and I'm going to watch what's happening over the next couple of days, and how this, with the Supreme Court and with Breonna Taylor and all this stuff, I know you should know it. Things are going to get worse and worse. They're going to get more violent. Now, what's interesting, and you're going to hear this after the fact, because I'm going to post this here in just a little bit, but as I am talking about what's more violent, I look on here and there's reports now of 2 officers being shot in Louisville, Kentucky. You see what I'm talking about, folks? The crisis management is not rocket science. It's just simply looking at the potential of what can happen and try and avoid it before it does. The problem with doing crisis management is that once it happens, it's very difficult to bring it back to a manageable level. And now we see. I'm gonna go look at this and see what exactly is happening. But see, all this stuff could be avoided, all of it, if people were engaged and actually took part in what is occurring in their city long before it occurs. And if people, such as law enforcement departments and all the cops, got together with the community and stood against these incompetent leaders. Same thing with the community itself, standing against the ridiculous lack of morals that's happening in all these states around. I mean, the country and the morals and ethics have just gone away. And I'm going to say one last thing. I go all over the country talking to people all the time, and I am astounded. No, listen, I'm blown away by the amount of women, Republican groups, conservative groups, people who care about this country that are involved. What shocks me is that when it comes to conservatives in this country, where are the men? Why aren't men getting together and getting ready, or trying to stop this stuff, or trying to have a conversation and putting their foot down? Where are you? What's going on? It's actually quite disturbing to me. The men have stopped serving. Now, I'm not saying anything about, putting women down for being strong. I mean, look at the Spartans back in the day, in Greece. Their women were fierce, but so were the men. I cannot say the same in today's society. We've got some issues in this country. And I want to leave you with this, okay? I want you to remember, a nation that is free absolutely requires the people to be engaged. Not when something happens, but before it happens. If you are not engaged in things that are occurring and you're just unaware and living freely, eventually nefarious people will step forward and take advantage of that. It's the same as if you leave your keys in the car and the windows rolled down. You could live in the safest place in the country. Eventually, probably, your car is going to be stolen. Freedom is the same way. It's time for crisis management to stop now before the communists take over. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and I'm out of here.